we all as a group of colleagues and friends was part of it in the very beginning, and then the fourth day, the 28th of January, the situation started to be very dramatic, with more violence from the police direction, and Ahmed was shot in that chaos. And in that moment, I think for us, it was, for all of us, it was like a moment which we decided to completely become different people. Like maybe before 28, we were just a couple of artists who were going there to document video and gathering with some other friends, or maybe more passionate into the group of the Facebook was called 26th of April and كلنا خالد سعيد. Those two groups on the Facebook, actually they start to organize the whole process of gathering in areas around Tahrir. Then later they decide to move in Tahrir to occupy and start this revolution. In the beginning it wasn't a revolution, it was just destroying the day of the police, because 25th of January is a day every day, the annual day of the police celebrate the day. So we were just going there to demonstrate about the way they treat us as a people, not only as intellectual but also as normal people who are become very occupied by this power. I think all our intention was completely become different after death of Ahmed Bassiouni. Just a little brief about him, because I'm going to show you some like maybe half of the film I prepared for him. Maybe the second week he died, to show people who he is, and because he was just an emerging young artist. He born in 1978, and he was just starting his career. He was just beginning of his success. He also teacher. He was sharing the same department and faculty of art education. That's where we all graduated. And he actually taught himself, because education system in Egypt, maybe you know, but it's very traditional, based on craft-based kind of curriculum. So we started together to create this independent workshop, which you will see some of his last workshop last summer. And we started together to create this every summer workshop in media art. Actually, he never go abroad. He never traveled. He never get any education in Europe or the States, like me or like any other established artist. He just educated himself by himself through the email and through internet. He get involved in many different workshops in open source recently that lasted 3 years. And we created this open source workshop, interactive digital work, just by personal connection with Hangar in Spain, and Madrid Media Lab and Laboral in Spain, most of it in Spain. Because actually it happened that the Spanish Cultural Center at that time was very active. So we started to communicate with them to bring artists working with open source, to teach some young artists what about using free new media to create new digital art. Ahmed was working with his last 2 performances with sensors, and he tried to use this media to create his new ideas. So he also a teacher. He created his sound art workshop. He also a musician. He worked with a group, maybe the only group working in the Middle East or in Egypt in particular in digital music. It's called 100 Life. And he was part of this group, and he also created this kind of new music by creating this new music by working with local musicians and play with them in live. So I would like to put, going to the same question, why Ahmed Bassiouni in that moment? Actually, the Venice Biennale project, actually it was corrupted before. Like it was like, maybe if you used to see Egyptian pavilion before in Venice Biennale, it was very traditional. That all of the selection came from friends around the community, and it was that what we used to see in Venice, which present Egypt. And we all as artists was very sorry about it. We always feel sad because it doesn't present Egypt. It doesn't present art scene in Egypt, because art scene is very strong. It have now at least a group of young or maybe my generation have a lot of international reputation now in using, especially in video and photography. So yes, so what happened in Venice, in Egyptian pavilion, doesn't present Egyptian scene. We all used to say that. Please don't go to the Egyptian pavilion and try to come and see what's happening in underground scene. So last year I mean not this biennale, but the last biennale, there was a competition, and they started to say, okay, we're gonna make a competition and we select So Ahmed who created a new project, and he presented it in this biennale, and they didn't even open the envelope. They just select artists. He picks a painter, very famous painter in Egypt, and he was presenting Egypt last year. And we was very angry. We started to demonstrate, and Ahmed was extremely angry. And then this year, they decided to close the pavilion because there's no budget and there's no any the situation that we talking about. The end of February, we start to go out from the square. So from the beginning of March, we start to think about what's going to happen to Venice. Venice is 2 months. It's coming in 2 months. What's going to happen? And they said, okay, no, there's no Venice this year. Egypt will close the pavilion. And I said, why? We can offer this project for Ahmed. And at that time, I was starting to look up on his computer. I asked to do because his wife trusts me so much. So I took his computer and I tried to look for his files and tried to archive his work, thinking about making something for him. So then it's time. So I start to talk to people I know in the committee and start to think, okay, can you try to see this project for him and try to make it simple without any budget and try to just to show some of his 2 performances he did in last year. The one he created in February 2010. In February 2010. And that was working, it's called 30 Days Running in a Place. And he was, maybe his second project working was digital performance. Like he was running with sensors which counting his sweating and energy, temperature, his body temperature, and transferring it to BD. It's open source program which visualized into pattern, like geometrical pattern, which is changing according to his sweating calculation. That's the performance he produced in February 2010. Later on in the performance, and he created on 21st of January. Maybe only us will see him because there's a very little photograph about this. Maybe you'll see some of the photo in the film. And we were astonished by seeing him wearing that. He didn't tell anyone. He wearing this clothes, this suit he was designed, and blue suit. It looked like a butcher suit, and he was in the middle of people carrying his camera. I said, "Okay, Ahmed, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to do performance." I said, "Come on, it's not the time to do performance. Like we are here to, we never know what's going to happen. So all this clothes is going to not make you free run because sometimes we have to run." So he said, "No, don't worry, I'm going to do it." And actually, the suit he was wearing, he was having wood clips, and in the performance, in the original performance, because he was wearing the suit he was using in another performance. He was creating some design in skin, like he covered the whole theater by skin material, and he was creating some kind of pattern in that skin with other actor. So I said, okay, all this thing you are carrying, it will not, so please go home and try to change your clothes and come back. I said, no, I am fine, like that. So people in the administration start to make photos with him and start to talk to him, and he is actually gathered and he grabbed all the people around in the square. And so he was doing the second performance and in the square. That's people maybe a lot of people doesn't know this. And then with this footage, I found it in his computer. And the rest of the footage which he shot in the day he died, it was completely lost because the guy who shot him, actually he was sure that he took the material from the camera, even take the whole camera. That's why Ahmed was shot in the night, like after the police was completely removed from the square. There's no one policeman in the square, and it was a night, like 9 o'clock night. There's an image in that maybe 30 minutes before he was died, or he was disappeared from, because we actually found him after 4 days of that moment. Actually, one of our friends just took a mobile shot with him by having this victory position in the middle of the square with one policeman in the square. So there's the snipers. There's people who's around him who's saying that he's got a shot from somewhere we never know. But because he was shooting with night shot, and he realized that someone also shot around him. So he was going closer and trying to look at him. So anyway, the guy he noticed, so he shot him before he get close to him. And I'm sure that this guy got down and took the camera while because now there's no evidence. Now there's nothing about anyone who shot in the square. That's the trail's going now. All those policemen are in the jail now, and there's no one evidence about shooting anyone. I think they are very sure about it. They don't leave any evidence. So Ahmed was presenting a young Egyptian artist who working very hard the last 5 years, trying to prove themselves at least in this Egyptian scene. They educate themselves. They try to create their own established standard locally, and some of them start to succeed by also their effort to move their work outside internationally. So he was one of those generations who should present Egypt very long time ago, and that's why I was very charged by moving this proposal and talking to everyone. Please come with me and try to push this and try to push it in media and try to push it everywhere, just to propose it, not because he was that he was killed or this like dramatic story behind him, but because he is a good artist, and if Egypt gonna present somebody, it should be him in that moment. So I don't want to make it too long. So this is maybe part of the film. We're gonna play it at the very end, because the very end is some videos I found it in his mobile, and maybe it was his last mobile, because the camera was. I don't know, but I found in 28th of January, a lot of footage he shot on his mobile, so I put it in film. So this is some brief idea of his previous work and his last lecture or his last workshop. He do it independently. I think it's very important to know that he created this workshop without any funding, without any support of the college, without any feedback. He doing the whole summer working in this just to teach a student what about sound as a medium and creating visual about sound. So that they try to teach them how to visualize the sound and work with it as abstract medium. So some sorry that it's not translated. So I try to it is any need translate. I will with my voice.
There you go. He was cool as a kid.
That's a project he's created on his very first project. It was in 2004. It was Who I Am. It was showed in Cairo in 2004 in Opera House.
الصوت عبارة عن موجة. الموجة دي بعمليها بالعضلة بتحكم في الطاقة.
Sound is a wave. I can change the wave by changing the Liverpool wave.
باص. بعمل كده اهو. كل الناس او ممكن كده كل الناس يبقى ايه كله يرفع الصوت. بعمل كده كله ايه يضخم الصوت. زي انا مثلا تعمل كده اهو. اساسا هو رفيع. كده في النص. كده تمام. كده تمام.
This is one of his very successful projects. He won a big prize in a very important annual exhibition for young artists in Egypt called Salon of Youth. And he won the biggest prize on his performance. Sharing the prize was another artist, sound artist, Magdi Mustafa. He was also part of Venice team. They work in 3 different projects together. And it's called The City. And they was recording at 20 different locations in the city in Egypt in sound recording, and they were creating like a virtual map of Cairo, and they will try to remapping the city by this guy who are sewing the parts again and remapping a new map of Cairo, sound map and this sewing. And and there was also invite people to record their voice and transfer their voice into environmental sound in the space. So the space is created by the sound space created by people who come and visit the project.
هو على الخشب عامله كده على الضغط على الضغط واقول له علي الضغط هو عارف العلاقه ما بين الاثنين عارف العلاقه ما بين العيون وطريقه تضخيم وتغيير في الطبقه بتاعت الصوت ممكن اعمل له الاثنين مع بعض بعمل كده مع بعض بعمل له الليفل وبعمل له دي مع بعض ماشي بس عموما دي اللي هنعدي عليها المرحله الثانيه هنبدا بالعادي خالص نعمل المرحله كده كله ساعات كله واخد دوره ونفسه.
Most of the students are girls. The most interested students work with sound or art. Most of them are girls, which is fantastic. This is the first project he worked with open source and sensors, and he created this huge portrait by light, and actually those light are changing by sound. So every visitor had to choose between his sound identity or his face identity. So as soon as you are talking in front the microphone, your image starts to disappear by light. And that was 2007. With the student, he never interacted with a teacher. It's like just one of them. It was really crazy. This is one of his last performance. This is 2010, and actually this performance is called the symmetrical system. And this is the one. Actually, this is the clothes. This is the suit he was wearing in 25th of January. And this performance, he create this huge. Actually, the theater is very important because it is one of the oldest Sufi dancing theater in Cairo. And he covered the whole floor by a skin material, like plastic material, look like skin. And he was creating this kind of performance by measuring distance and creating patterns out of those skin, like going in, like transforming the theater into body, and he trying to create this relation with this body. This is last performance, but not his last work. Last performance, this is 30 days running in the place, and he used two kind of sensors. One was he put it in his shoes, and another he put it in his body. So these two, as you see in the frame, these two parameters. One of the battery, another is calculation, and the battery actually is measuring his sweating temperature, and calculation is his footstep. So both of those data is transferred into computer wireless, and it's transferred into screen, which creates this pattern, like mathematical pattern, which changing by incoming data.
الملعب. هو ده انتوا بقى اللي بتعملوا.
That's Thursday, 25th of January. That's his last statement on Facebook. I was beaten by the police security in the south, and if they wanted peace, they wanted wars, we wanted peace. And I'm just fighting for my country dignity. That's his last image before he just died. That's images taken from his mobile. 28th of January. That's Ahmed. Ahmed was killed by one of the snipers of police security, and he was crashed under one of her car in 28th of January 9th, 2011. That's in Tahrir Square. That's where we used to meet.
ممكن حد يعمل كده يا جماعه؟
Okay, thank you.
All right, good morning. Well, you are the most hardcore audience I've ever spoken to. Saturday morning at 10 o'clock after Bruce LaBruce zombie party, come on. I'm impressed. Well, I think this last talk just reminds us, and it's probably for this topic a good thing to start with, that if we have any hopes of expanding the sphere in which behavior and gesture and discourse can in any way challenge the status quo, it's only going to happen through struggle. That's the only way. There's no other one. It's happening through struggle, and it happens through the consequences we're willing to accept given that struggle. I mean, it's certainly a lesson that I take away from Egypt whenever I see those kind of images. I guess if we can go to the first image. And this is an interesting, I'm kind of coming a full circle in the time that I've known Mike. Back in, I think it was 95 in Paul, he asked us to talk about censorship again. And I started with this image, and I'll start with it again. Actually, it was Steve Barnes who was speaking. And this was kind of a really moving piece for us in Critical Art Ensemble in figuring out how it was we were going to engage forces of expression management. And what we wanted to show in this was that no matter what environment you were in, these forces were at work, right? That there is repressive agents out there Sometimes you see them, sometimes they don't. They prefer to stay invisible if at all possible. But the minute you do anything that deviates from expectation, they will appear. And to show people that, this is at Daytona Beach. And what our performance person was doing is, all he's doing is playing with kids' toys. In this case, it's a little racetrack for those of you that remember Hot Wheels. And he's pushing a little Winnebago around. It's part of a larger project we were doing, but I won't go into that, we don't have time. And we loaded the deck a little bit. He does have a Burger King crown on. And his boombox is a montage of car crash sounds and children saying, when are we going to get there? And every time he did this, you wouldn't think, he's out of the way, he's not blocking anything, he's not bothering everyone, it's not too loud, especially for Daytona Beach where everything is really loud. People driving up and down the beach in their 4x4s. And, all of these supposed acts of autonomy, jumping on bungee cords and excess drinking and whatever else might be considered freedom. But when you get to this small deviant act, the police were right there, and every time we did it, every place, they were there within 3 minutes. Because that's not about consumption, which is what Daytona Beach is about. As long as you're paying to do bungee cords and you're paying to get drunk, and go right ahead. But the minute you get off the beam a little bit, and this is really slight, you're going to be arrested. And this, to us, it made us really understand that anyone can be arrested anytime, and there's all of these incredibly vague laws to do it. And I've never been anywhere that this hasn't been the case. Maybe there's an exception somewhere, but I don't know what it is. In this case, they're threatening to arrest them for public nuisance. I don't even know what that means, and I'm sure they don't either. It's just the kind of power they have and something that they can do. And there are others. What they're actually doing in this picture is discussing what charge they might arrest him for. Public nuisance was the conclusion. They were thinking, well, it could be vagrancy, perhaps. It could be disturbing the peace. They had a few that they would go for. So sometimes it's like that. It's a struggle not worth fighting, just a point worth making. But other times it can be more serious, as we've already heard. If we go to the next slide, that's my house being raided by the whole alphabet soup of various Homeland Security agencies, most notably 5 offices of the FBI. And that wasn't for all that much. Apparently, using science equipment, in this case biological, molecular biology equipment, and the wetware that goes with it, was not acceptable. That could only be understood in the frame of terrorism, in spite of the fact I'm a professor that specializes in the intersection of science and art. Couldn't possibly be that. It had to have been terrorism, and kind of there's the response. Go to the next image. But those aside, we all know that repressive group is out there, and what we usually call censorship is when they show up and call attention to themselves. In spite of the fact this is happening all the time, it's an ongoing negotiation that in everything we do, every single day, we're trying to work through these elements of expression management that can be useful at times, but almost always quite detrimental when placed in terms of the discourse of resistance. Right? When it runs against that, it's usually never helpful. Now, even worse, everyone's probably wondering, why am I showing a picture of Leipzig City Hall? Well, it was because we were doing a project to recreate an experiment that was done in San Francisco for large area coverage anthrax attacks. And what we wanted to do was to see if we could hit our human guinea pigs that were surrounding the American consulate, but we needed a nice high spot to do it from. And the Leipzig City Hall, they have the best tower. It was like perfect, the wind direction was right, it was everything we needed to conduct this experiment and see what would happen. that aside, though, why I put this in was my thought while driving by it. And I looked at it, I was like, wow, that is the perfect site. And I think to myself, it's the perfect site, but like, we're going to go in there, go to building security, and say, all right, this is what we need to do. We know you're closed Saturday, but we're doing this thing on Saturday. We need to use the tower. Just give us the keys. It's going to be a bunch of guys. We're going to have some equipment. You're going to need to run some power up there. You might see some smoke coming off the tower. Ignore that. And when we're done, we'll let ourselves out. And so, you know, as that's going through, that scenario playing in my mind, I was just like, okay, forget that. We really have to find a site where someone's going to understand what we're doing. Because if we go in and say that, it's going to be like, oh, you got to make a phone call now? It's going to be one of those situations. But I voiced this to the curator, and the curator said, oh, no, we're going to go in and do exactly just that. And we did. And the bloody security said, okay, here's the keys. So I was completely amazed by that. But the lesson is you know, this is what Guattari would call microfascisms. You know, where the security state gets inside us, and we're doing it for them, right? Foucault talks a lot about this in terms of discipline and what discipline means now, right? It's these internalizations that we can't help ourselves. And I don't care how radical or critical or self-aware you think you are, they're in there. And to catch them is really hard. I would have never done it if that person, Frank Muntz, this curator, had not said, no, we're going to go in there and do just that. Because I'm thinking, we're on our way to jail if we do this. Right? That's a really bad situation when that's happening. I mean, that's kind of the one that I think we have to watch out most. Now, if this is the case, right, if we can come to some kind of consensus, and I hope we can, that we're just always going to face certain repressions in relations to certain behaviors and expression. It's just a given. The question to me that's more interesting is, okay, so operationally, what are we going to do? Right. Next one. This is just from behalf of time. Yeah. Okay. This is probably most of you recognize this Warhol's electric chair, one of the iterations of it. And I find Warhol inspirational in this regard because he had two agendas, right? One, to become famous and rich, and that. But the second agenda is the interesting one, the subversive agenda, and that was to create an authoritative out queer culture, right? He wanted it showing. And what does he do for the first few years? I guess, you know, also accomplishing mission one. But he's making work like this. Work that means almost anything. Even in the most censorious environment, you can get away with this. Right? It was brilliant. And whether it was the Coke cans or Brillo boxes or whatever, it was all the same. It was these elements that you could put any interpretation into. So you can read this as, well, this is Warhol against the death penalty. This is, you know, him showing in stark means how bad it is and what kind of barbarity this represents. Or you can, let's say that was hanging over the desk of your local sheriff. It means kill them all, right? And either one's fine. I mean, it holds either of those opposite interpretations and anything in between. And through this, it's kind of like, well, you know, Warhol stuff, we don't really know. And he would never say what it means. You don't really know what it means. And you look at the films in the mid-'60s, particularly between 64 and 66, these things are outrageous. A film like Taylor Veed's Ass, how does he do it? And this is at a time in New York where the conflict between queer culture and the police particularly was horrifying. And yet he's able to make these amazing films that are just completely out there, are in your face, that I don't know how anyone else at that particular time could have done it. And he's doing it under the cover of these other images. That it's just, oh, it's Warhol, it's art. I mean, it all of a sudden becomes excusable. Any other context, any other place, all those folks would have been going to jail. You could do this, we could say the same with Barbara Kruger. Like I said, because of time, I don't want to go into it too much, but of her goal, how do you get feminist art into the museum? Right? And those of you paying attention to the Guerrilla Girls in the early 80s know there wasn't any of it. So how does she do it? Same kind of strategy. Right? Your body is a battleground. Now, I think we probably in here all have a consensus to what that means, but not everybody would read this the same way. Right? We could talk to a lot of those onward Christian soldier forces. They would not read it that way. They see their body as a battleground, all right? And they love the metaphor of the battleground. That's like their territory. So you can get a pretty different reading on that. And in these full spectrums, again, it's amazing the kind of places something like that can slip into. So just to show you kind of like a few small projects for us. We were given all the screens, we could show something on the Toronto subway. So every station has these little screens, and we could broadcast on all of them. But you can imagine the rules that come with this, right? Because, you know, it's so many people with so many different interests and so many perspectives, and the last thing the subway system wants is any kind of complaint about anything, right? Or they're going to pull the plug on the culture stuff because it's just not worth it. So here's where we can use that exact thing, is how can we make an image that can carry a message that we want, but is still diverse enough that you have plausible deniability. That when someone says, oh, that's what you're saying? Oh, no, we wouldn't say that. Come on, it's just art. Child is Audience. This was one where it was basically a CD that was made with Creationist Crucifixion, talking about child exploitation in the workforce and sub-minimum wage and other things that they do. And it also was how to hack your Game Boy, and we had made games that you could put on your Game Boy. Now, what's the problem here? Adults talking to children. This is a really hard audience to access for numerous reasons. One, because of the disciplinary apparatus around children, right? Because of the tremendous fear of sexual exploitation of some type, right? Adults and children, it's, you know, and especially, you know, the technology and anarchy are fucking, you really just, that probably shouldn't be around the kids, right? And then on the other hand, you have the kids themselves. They don't want to hear anything from adults. They're trying to escape you, right? Last thing they want to hear is something about that. So that's where he's like, okay, so who can talk to adults? And then how do we filter what we want to say through them? And that's where, if it's a band, that's okay. A band can be 10 years older than the teams they're playing to, not a problem. And it's amazing kind of the message lines that open up once you've got that. Political situations, rallies, fundraisers, and such like. This was one Geraldine Ferraro did. This was back during the NEA days when the National Endowment for the Arts was under attack and they were pulling the grants for individuals because of the Karen Finley Project and Holly Hughes and, you know. And Ferraro thought she would help the arts community and herself by having what she called a night of free expression, in which case we were, as artists, to donate art to her. And Metro Pictures sponsored it, a very progressive gallery. That we were to donate art, and then she would auction it off and keep the proceeds, and at the same time make a statement about her support of non-censorship. So we made this. And everyone should love the 1992 Photoshop there. For you aficionados of the old days, yes, it was that crude at one time. But we thought we kind of had it. It's like, what can they do? It's the night of free expression. We can make whatever we want. It wasn't like it is today where electoral politics actually means something in America because the right is so extreme. Back in these days, it was just generic centrism where everyone promised to continue exploitive relationships as always. So we made this, we brought it to them, and they immediately censored it. So Night of Free Expression started off really well. with our project getting thrown out. And this gallery we were working with had the great idea of calling the New York Post, which is like, for those of you unfamiliar, it's like this right-wing rag. You can't really even call it a newspaper, though it kind of is. And page 6, which is one of its gossip pages, it's one of its Scale of Journalism pages, they picked up on it, and they hate Ferrara. And so it's like immediate for them to go after. It's like, why have we censored this work, And they backed down and actually had to put it in. So, I mean, there are these points of leverage that we can use. Okay, last but not least, I thought I'd put one in that where we were probably over the legality line. And this was one in Australia of Victoria Park, this kind of monument to British imperialism, was appropriated, and what it was, it took away sacred land from the Ghana tribe. And they had forever been asking for a dual naming at least, which at this time was very common in Australia. It wasn't an odd policy or an odd request or out of left field or anything like that. And we basically said to them, look, the way to do this is let's just change it ourselves. We'll take down half the signs. We'll go and make new ones and put them up. And the elders agreed to it, and we formed kind of just a little tactical committee to go do it, and went out and did it. Now, how to do it? Do you try and sneak in at 2 in the morning? We thought probably not, because if anyone sees that. We chose instead to do it in plain sight. When there was a big concert in the park, the police had their hands full, kind of dressed up a little bit like workers and had fake little tags for the city and everything. Went out and changed the signs. So they were taken down a few days later. But we wrote to the paper, said we would continue doing it, and I can't say that in the end it had anything to do with us, but now the park is dual named. So we can't fight, but it's about struggle, it's about facing consequences. And I think I'm going to leave it with that.
Okay. Neil, have we got a microphone that can roam?
We haven't, but what we do have is a microphone which can be placed down the front.
Does that mean people are going to have to come down the front to speak? Okay. I'd like to put a question to both of you, really, which is, clearly we've got 2 artists with us who've continued to make work which challenges the status quo long before they've had crisis in their life. And of course, Shadi's an agent for an artist, but I'm kind of closely associating him with that kind of body of work and that period of time. Is that fair to say? Is that fair? So this hasn't, this isn't really what I'm trying to say is this isn't reactive. Yeah? If we know the stories over the last 20 years, this is a long process. And I really kind of wanted to pick up on this notion that it's a continuum, because you can continue to make the work. Yeah? Now you obviously have that advantage, but Ahmed doesn't. Yeah? And I'd like to ask you actually directly, in terms of the massive changes that we've seen in the last 3 or 2 months in Egypt. Okay, okay. Perhaps you can say something about where you think he would be now and what he'd be doing.
You mean situation in Egypt now? In his head? Okay. I mean that your question is about describing the situation or when Ahmed think about it? Ahmed think about it. I think it will be the same what we think about, and he never. I think it's getting more and more complicated. Yes, we get rid of the regime, which is very deep in the ground, and it's very corrupted, and the country has been suffer from more than 30 years. years under this regime. People that you have to understand that the situation in Egyptian people, like, the Egyptian people are very secure. They want just to live their life peacefully, and they don't want any interruption in this kind of peaceful life because it's already hard. It's already a very hard life. They can hardly live, and maybe 50% of the population are and cannot live that proper life. So revolution come and make it much more worse for them because they almost have no job for almost 6 months. And it's now the situation has become how to convince the majority of Egyptians about the good about making this revolution and good about making the change. They don't feel it because they feel what they feel is their life is getting much worse. Okay, so this is I think this is a big problem. Artists started to create the graffiti in the wall, started to address it in Facebook because of course Facebook is still elite. They're still talking to that group of young who are working with Facebook or internet or website. But to reach the majority, actually, the main problem is the media, the mass media, is still controlled by old regime. And this is also very important. That the people who are still working with mass media and television, which normal television, local television, it's which addressing all information about power, about change, about all this, which we all they are planning to do, and it's still going in the same direction. So I think main problem now is to face these two directions of recontrolling the try of the old regime to get back through some hidden channels we don't know to make trouble all the time. You maybe heard about what happened in Israeli embassy recently, and of course this is not Revolution Act. That was not revolution people. I was there, and people who was acting this in the Israeli embassy, they weren't one of the revolutions. There were some people who make trouble. They want to create trouble in the country. So yeah, this is I think the big change, the big challenge now for in Egypt to get rid of this old regime and also get rid of the fanatics. Because the Islamic Brotherhood and Islamic extremists started to also become on the surface. And this is also, I think, the biggest challenge for us as an intellectuals trying to have some role in changing the future, which is extremely difficult.
Of course, Steve, I know that living in America, you don't have these issues because your work's been so successful. But perhaps you'd like to comment on this too.
Yeah. That's what a setup that is. But yeah, in America, it's a different version of it because it is the same thing in terms of people hoping to get a peaceful life. Yeah, I'd say it's about 50% that are well under. And the new poverty statistics just came out, and it's appalling. The redistribution of wealth over the past 30 years in favor of the wealthiest people, appalling. The type of labor intensification that has occurred in relation to falling wages. It's the same kind of nightmare in a different form, but it's all the same manifestations of a very pathological capitalism. It's what we're seeing here, and it's what we're seeing there. And with that comes, how do you make these things, these trends, as invisible as you can possibly make them? And how do you keep the invisible in that status? And, certainly after the Bush years, they've really refined that to such a point by expanding the security apparatus to a proportion it's not even intelligible right now. That's how bad it is.
Different kind of question really is that you and Ahmed and you, Steve, have managed to continue your practice, but you've also managed to archive it, and you've also managed to kind of record the practice. Like, whilst there was writing going on the street, you actually took the trouble to get the files. Likewise, when there was disjuncture in your life, you managed to get the strength to continue to make art. I think you said what are we going to do? Yeah, you know, and ultimately, again, last night, and I'm kind of practical. Do you think that there is a stronger need right now for a politically informed art, or do you think art just goes ahead and it actually doesn't make any difference at all as to what's going on around it?
Oh, this question. You know, you're really giving me the setups today, Mike. Well, I always think there should be a politicized form of art. And what that means is that there is a form of art that isn't of the status quo, where the values and principles are just so legitimized and habitualized that you don't see them. Because all art is, to me, thoroughly political. I mean, it's when there is a minor art of some kind that begins to speak out. And then it's like, whoa, that's political. It's like, well, yeah, because, you know, it doesn't have the same legitimacy, it doesn't have the same history, and so on. But to the more serious part of the question of, well, can art do anything? I'm no great fan of the 60s particularly, but one of the things I am really a fan of is that that's when it's genuinely realized that any political campaign must have a parallel cultural campaign. The two things are necessary for support. One will fall apart without the other. I mean, I think that was the really breakthrough message at that time that is just carried on, and importantly so. So having said that, I just say let's compare the cultural to the political in terms of action, and you have to ask the right question. The wrong question, which is this misguided individualism, is can an artwork do anything? Well, probably not. I mean, most artworks, maybe in a small operational, limited sense, like with the Target yoga piece there, maybe so. But mostly the answer to that is no, but that's the wrong question. Just like it's saying, if we have a protest against the war, will that stop it? No, it's not going to stop it. The question is, what can culture do as an aggregate over time when it takes on a resistant mantle? And that way, we can see it move mountains, right? It's made a huge difference all through the 20th century, even going back from the mid-19th century forward, that there has been a resistant cultural wing that has been essential, and it's only grown its importance, particularly as we enter this kind of intense technosphere we're in right now. So, yes, I think it makes a huge difference. Is maybe something critical art, some small project like that? Well, no. But put it all together. Put all of the culture together against the wars. And where does that lead? And I think that's when you get a whole different thing. Yeah, one die-in at the governor's mansion isn't going to stop the AIDS crisis. But incredible progress has been made in the politics of AIDS in a progressive way.
Yeah, I think the situation in Egypt is the contemporary situation is declared a lot of different change, because artists in Egypt maybe they are not used to use language like political language they work, because they are always being occupied and they always been censorship, and there is something like they always been. So it's for the first time they start to think about, okay, now we can do work in a street, we can make some performance as demonstration in the street, as a kind of art, as a group. So there is, yes, I know some group in which actually I was part of them, which created some group of performance in the square. That was into it from the beginning of the revolution until maybe the beginning of March, when the military come and start to kick us out. So yeah, but I think what's really very fantastic, what we learned a lot from it, which arts came from normal people, like people who never think that they can do art in their life. But actually, what we consider is that what they are doing is art. When we are in the 18 days of the square, people was creating a lot of that was really fantastic to actually learn from. The way they write their signs, and there was a great graffiti artist. We never know him before, that he was creating this pattern, and anyone who comes with a piece of paper, he just sprays for him. So it's like just go with the paper and I spray a sign for you. and that was really fantastic. And so people learn how to. I think they just do it, and they never think that this is art. But now with the study of what's happening in now in Egypt, that's the art is. I think it's could be a very important medium which could make a lot of change, especially when you are facing a huge machine which is mass media controlled by another part. So you need to work another level which could reach the majority. And I think this could be like we are actually as a group thinking of creating a new different project in Basset or in the billboard, like normal wood billboard in the streets, which is of course it could be stay for almost 2 days and before they remove it. So this kind of project is not, it's rare. It was before in the history of Egypt, but now I think it's going to be there, and I think it will be very effective.
I just want to make one statement, and then I'm going to hand it over to you guys. And really, I suppose what I'm observing is that there is a strong emphasis on social and adaptive practice above and beyond individual art making. So that when I'm looking at the documentation of Ahmed working with a bunch of young women doing effectively a kind of phonetic, poetic workshop, that's fantastic. Regardless of the national context, it's just fantastic. I'd be very happy, in fact, if we had workshops like that every day. But in terms of the audience, because we've got a mixture here of artists and actually quite a lot of significant media art historians, that where does that social discourse and collaborative practice actually sit within the media art history that's being reflected back to us, especially over the last few days? So, yesterday we kind of tried to wind it up a bit, and now I'm kind of winding it back up again in another way. So in a sense I'm charging you as the historians to have a think about where's this sitting within a history which is largely around technical systems, methods of seeing, and so on. The majority of the papers that we've been listening to over the last few days. So I'm going to hand this over to the audience now. We've got about 20 minutes. So would anyone like to ask a question? Omar, thank you.
I'd like to ask a question and do it by way of a sort of statement or provocation, because I've not been able to speak or sit in any of the sessions this week, unfortunately. And it's been, for me, quite frustrating, that alienation. And I think that this is an important forum for that, because this is the closing keynote of the Rewire conference. I wanted to pose this thing about kind of real ironies. Because, and to do that, I wanted to offer a bit of context about Ahmed Bassooni's work in relation to the Rewire Conference and the Abandoned Normal Devices Festival. So the work that's in Gallery 2 that is curated by Shadi, by Ahmed Bassooni, is part of an exhibition themed around the notion of belief, and it is in that exhibition because the new construct, the way it was installed, coupled with traditional Tahrir Square, gave it this dynamic whereby it was talking about surveillance culture and kind of dismantling conventional systems of belief in media. It was also chosen to be part of this conference because of this idea when Shadi was talking about contemporary visual arts in not only Egypt but in the Arab world. There's a traditional perception that is relates to kind of a craft-based culture that is consistently trying to catch up with Western modernism. This was something we wanted to open up and discuss. So by putting an Egyptian media artist in the context of the 4th International Conference on Media Art Histories, it was about trying to slant that axis a little bit. Because I sat there and I really feel compelled I have to say this, and I have said hello to almost all of you. And I think, from as far as I'm aware, over 250 delegates, that there isn't one speaker that is black in this entire conference. Media art, as I see it, as much as we talk about it being exiled from a conventional canon of media art, yet it's an entirely almost white discipline. And so really this is politically another reason why this work was there. And so I wanted to put that kind of pre-say provocation there as to overarch this, and then to say, well, isn't it ironic now that Shadi, you speak about how Ahmed was making this art, and he was unable to find it represented in this canon, in this milieu where his practice was considered renegade, but then once he's killed, managed from the government, is reappropriated in a different way. So isn't that, well, how do you feel about the irony of politics